All right. If you would, go ahead and, for those of you that keep a notebook for each study, you can get out your systematic theology notebook. I want to focus today probably mostly on the science in the Bible. The science that we know today is portrayed in the Bible before it was portrayed in the world, and I have some examples of that. So I want to look at the accuracy of the Bible and as it displays the Bible as God's revelation. Go ahead and go to Isaiah chapter 40. Now, we come to this part again, like I said, but we're talking about the accuracy of the Bible. How the Bible is God's revelation. I broke down, this wasn't in the notes, but it was me trying to understand. So how can we understand the accuracy of the Bible? Because it goes deeper. Some of the passages that we brought out, there's one of them in particular, I read it out of T.P. Simmons' notes, and it went right over my head. And then I read it again, and I was just like, wow, I didn't even see that. There was science in a place, in a revelation of God, I guess you would say, in a place that I did not see it. And it was just a really cool thought in my mind when I started to think about it. So, how can we understand the Bible? So we have scientific evidence. We have scientific evidence in the Bible that we know can be true based off of what we know today, what we can prove. People like to say, I only believe what I can see, what I can feel, what I can touch. Well, there is scientific examples used in the Bible that we know the Bible becomes a revelation of God because they were revealed in the Bible long before they were ever revealed to us as knowledge to us. And I'll explain that more in a minute. We also have fulfilled prophecy. Now, we're not going to necessarily get all the way to prophecy today. We might get into one or 2 points, but we're going to see for time's sake. But we know that in the Bible there's fulfilled prophecy. The clearest and most plain examples are events that are spoken of in the Old Testament that come true in the New Testament. I picked an example with the help of the study guide of the Old Testament of a prophecy of King Cyrus before he comes to power about 150 to 200 years beforehand. So there's multiple ways that we can understand that the Bible is accurate. It's not a made-up book. There's things that you can go in, and we're going to, by God's grace, with His help, we're going to put some of these things together. We also see that the Bible is accurate on the sufferings of Christ. Now, before I go any farther, we're not going to get there today. So I thought we were going to get there, but we read Psalms 22 this morning in our message this morning. Psalms 22 was the prophecy of Christ's suffering. Isaiah 53 is also one of those. In those two, we can see prophecy coming true of how Christ would suffer at a later time. So through scientific evidence, fulfilled prophecy, the sufferings of Jesus Christ's life, we can determine that the Bible is accurate. Now, the last, I would say, asterisk to this, and I use that term lightly, I have this thing over here. Deep study. It takes deep study to understand some of these things. I am the person, I remember one thing that by God's grace I understood from a young age as a preacher is I needed to know the setting, the person, the place, the time of what I was reading. When you open this book, you go Genesis to Revelation. The problem is, that's the order that God wanted those books to be put in. That's not the order of when the books were written. So a vast number of the books were written at the earliest of times. Job is believed to be the oldest book in the Bible. Now, some people debate it. We're not going to do that today. I believe it's the oldest book in the Bible. Job has a lot to do with what we're going to get into starting to go forward. But you got to know who wrote it, when was it written, what point of prophecy was that book referring to. When you start to understand more than just a chapter and a verse, and you understand those three items, you begin to learn a lot. You begin to see the teachings that the Bible can offer you. So go over to Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22. So we're going to talk about science today. We're going to talk about the accuracy in the Bible in describing the scientific matters. It proves that the Bible is not human. It's not from man. It's not man-made in any way. Go to Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22. It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers that stretcheth out the heavens, as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. I have this nice little comment. Is the earth flat? There's a whole big movement of people who think the earth is flat. In Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22, what does it say? It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth. The earth is not flat. The earth is not flat. Science, the way we live, I don't want to get too deep because I'm going to cover multiple points of it, but the way the earth is formed, the way that we're here, the way that it turns, the way that the seasons and everything else is science proving much farther ahead that God gave us in Isaiah chapter 40, gave us the revelation that the earth is round. Something simple. Very, very simple. When you read that passage, it's so easy. When you look at that, it is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth. It's so easy to just move into the next point and not realize what's being said. Roundness of the earth displays God's teachings in everything. And I want you to, if you're taking notes, I want you to write that, but I want you to write that in a place where you can underline it. Because the rest of the points that are going to come back to that are going to come back to the earth being round and the teachings of God. And they're going to be in different chapters, in different books, in different verses. If you were to read the Bible and you were to read these and kind of what I'm just saying, it's important to know more than just the words. What does that mean? Well, the context is setting when this was written, and I don't want to give too much. Well, let's just keep going. Isaiah prophesied in the late 8th century, 740 BC. That's when Isaiah would have started to prophesy. Well, in the prophesying, we see revealed here that the earth is round. The earth was not mentioned to be round, was not hypothesized by man other than Isaiah's writings, by anything I can find, it wasn't until the 6th century BC, or it was 240 years later, at 500 BC, when it was first thought of the earth being round. The Bible, and the point of this is, God has revealed to us some things. People don't like to believe it, but it was revealed here. We know when this was written about. Even if it took Isaiah 100 years, he was still 140 years from the first person on earth claiming that the earth was round, the first teaching claiming that the earth was round. And then it took another 400 years after for it to commonly be accepted by people that the earth was round. Remember all the stories back when they were sailing in the 1400s and they thought that they were just going to fall off the face of the earth? They just kept going west. They're just going to fall off the face of the earth. Remember that? Maybe they don't teach that in school anymore. I don't know, but I remember that. And it just goes to show you the rejection of God's word. How people don't like that. But when you read that, I just don't see how you can ignore it. And that's not even the best one. That's not even the one that just attracted my attention and caused me to just go, man, how do I miss this? You know, anybody that claims to be a flat earther or says the earth is flat, they're just sinning. They're going against what the Bible says. Well, that's just kind of a side note to it. Be careful of that. The book of Isaiah, like I said, it was written in the latter part of the 8th century. Pythagoras, about 200 years later, was the one who started the theory and started to believe that the earth was round. And it was another 400 years after that when astrologers in the early 1st century started to believe that the earth was round and had some rotation and other things like that. Now, I'm not teaching science, nor am I qualified to, so I'm not going a whole lot deeper than the dates in and out of things. But what I want you to understand is the biblical date always comes before the public date. We think it's a story, but it's revealing to us something that we will find out is true at a later time. Gravity. I gave you all of it here. Go to Job chapter 26. Job. Now, if I have grammatical errors, spelling errors, punctuation errors, y'all just have to deal with it. I am not an English major. I proofread, but, only go so far with me. The teaching of gravity. When was it taught? Well, Isaac Newton began teaching gravity in the late 1600s. Since Job is regarded as the oldest book in the Bible, even if we said that it wasn't the oldest book in the Bible, even if we agreed with the theologians that put it at the time of the Jewish exile. Well, the Jewish exile, before we even read, the Jewish exile happened a long time before the 1600s. So here again, we find the Bible as being accurate on the teaching of gravity. In chapter 26, verse 7, it says, "He stretcheth out the north over the empty place, and hangeth the earth upon nothing." The teaching of gravity, as it's revealed in Job, it's so profound. First off, the hanging of the earth takes a mighty being to hang this earth. It takes an even mightier being to hang this earth in the center of nothing. It takes an even mightier being to explain gravity and nature and how it keeps us here. See, people want to debate it. People can This world is going to do a whole lot of other things to try to take away from the accuracy and authority of the Bible. But you see, even in Job, there's the teaching of gravity. How does the earth hang in nothing? How does it move around the sun, as we call it? How does it orbit? By gravity. That's how it hangs there with nothing. How do we, so then before we go any farther, I want you all to think about last week. One of our points last week was talking about, but for the teachings of God, how would man know these things? But for the revelation of God to man, how would we know about creation? Let me ask you something. When you think about it, but for the teachings of God, how would we be able to understand gravity? How would we be able to understand the seasons, the movement, the roundness of the earth? How can we even do that on earth? It takes a greater authority. Go to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1 and verse 6. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day." Fun fact, I feel like I can't say the word firmament. I feel like every time it rolls off the tongue, I'm stuttering, I'm missing. And so when I have to read this, it's painful, because it's like I have to just keep saying it over and over and over again. But we see here the nature of heavens, not heaven, heavens as referred to in the book of Genesis in chapter 1, and I'll get there in a minute, and the firmament. Again, I want you all to think back before we go any farther. How could this be revealed to us to know? Do we still live with a firmament around us today? Partially. But part of it was destroyed in the Great Flood. That's how it happened so instantaneous, that some of the water that was being upheld by the firmament collapsed. We have the atmosphere that was formed. But other than that, how would we have the teaching? We wouldn't, except for the Bible. The accuracy of what happened in the Bible. Now, before the second day, the earth was completely surrounded by a thick layer of water, kind of like a vapor of water. This is creation. This is the science of creation. The earth existed. There was just, I think the easiest way to explain it is such a dense fog full of moisture. And on the second day, as we read, and God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." There was a division between the water on earth and the water in the heavens, or the skies, as it's going to be commonly referred to. Two parts, one here, one up there, and then what we'll see is the clouds, the atmospheric layers, they took the water. They held some of the water back. Some of the water stayed on earth. The science of that comes from the Bible first. How would we have known? God is describing in Genesis chapter 1, verse 6, the clouds, the atmospheres, the roundness of the earth. We think about the firmament and how it stretched out. Well, If it's going to cover the earth, the earth's got to be round. And it all goes back to the earth being round and the movement and the gravity and the heavens and things of that nature. But in verse 20, it says, "And God said, Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven." In Genesis, the heaven here was referred to the skies that the fowls of the air could fly. Now, there's a ceiling for every bird or flying thing that God has created, where they can only fly so high. That's why you see it's referred to as the heavens. The revealing of the skies, the atmosphere, and the flying ability is all done there. And now, keep in mind, we're taking just micro copies of scientific evidence in the Bible. Some easy ones for us to maybe understand. Like I said in verse 20, God called the expansion of space the heavens, not eternal, but just over top. Go to Psalms chapter 19. There's a really neat word here in Psalm 19. When we talk about the nature of the heavens or the firmament, it's going to go into our next point, but in Psalm 19, verse 6, "His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof." It's interesting, but circuit is a word in which would make completion. You think about any type of usage of the word circuit, it's always something going to completion or going to end. And you look in verse 6, you see that nothing is hid from the heat thereof. The sun, as the earth, as the firmament completes its circuit, completes its movement, nothing is hid from it. It's moving. So we see the nature of the heavens, the firmament, is that what it seems like is it's moving, but it's revealing itself. I'm trying to think of the simplest way to put it. Nothing is hid from the heat of the sun. Nothing is hid from the heavens. The sun that's high above the firmament and into the heavens will shine on every spot of the earth. That'll get us into the next point where we talk about the rotation of the earth. Go over to Luke chapter 17. Luke chapter 17, verse 34 through 36. "I tell you, in the night there shall be two men in one bed. The one shall be taken and the other shall be left. Two women shall be grinding together. The one shall be taken and the other left. Two men shall be in the field. The one shall be taken and the other left." Now I read that the very first time. I was like, well, that's got to be a misprint. Why would we have that verse? What does that verse prove? It's why we have to have such a deeper level of study. "I tell you, in the night there shall be two men in one bed. One shall be taken and the other shall be left." Now, this is where you need to read before. What comes before this? Okay? Talking about the second coming of Christ. So as Christ is explaining the second coming, he's saying there's going to be two people sleeping. One man's going to be taken and one man's going to be left behind. And then it gets to verse 35. 2 women shall be grinding together. The one shall be taken and the other left, working. Verse 36, 2 men shall be in the field, the other shall be taken and the other left. You can't work in the field if it's nighttime in this place. In this very, 3 verses, you see that the earth moves. That someone sleeps when it's dark, someone works when it's light. So it's creating some movement of the earth in these 3 verses. The first time I read this, I go, now what does that have to do with anything? And then it just kind of hit me over the head like, there's the rotation of the earth. There's the movement of the earth. There's the scientific evidence proving that the earth moved right there before our eyes. People in different places of the world, when the second coming of Christ happens, there's going to be people in different places of the world doing different things. Some sleeping, some working. But it's all going to happen at the same time. Now, I'm not preaching on that. I'm giving you scientific evidence of the accuracy of the Bible. Has anything I've said so far not been proven in the Bible first? It hasn't. It was taught in the Bible as a revelation from God. And then we credit, quite frankly, I'll say it this way, and I know some people really wouldn't, probably, I don't say this unappreciatively, but we credit people for findings that the Bible has already said. You know what I mean? We credit people for finding these things and doing these things. It's already been given. Now, granted, there might have been some people that weren't able to have an ability to read one of these books, to learn these things. But we don't credit the Bible for it. We credit the person for it. See, I'm getting carried away and not clicking, so sorry. Maybe I'll just give you verses next week. But it is such a... I hope maybe you even seen it. Maybe you read that verse the first time, and maybe you didn't see it. Maybe you didn't see the rotation of the earth. And just as a side note, if we go back and we talk about the Bible, when we talk about the depth of the Bible, look at that verse. Those 3 verses were talking about the second coming of Christ. And we somehow got the rotation of God's planet Earth in the 3 verses on the second coming of Christ. And that's just because of the way that we're looking at it today. Just look at the vast depth of the Bible. It's incredible. Go back to Ecclesiastes. Oh, before I go. So, Copernicus is the one in the 16th century that developed the heliocentric model of the movement and rotation of the earth. Well, that would place him about 1,500 years too late. The New Testament had this printed 1,500 years before that. Or 14, somewhere between 14 and 1,500. Printed is probably a hard word to use for that. But we see that there was ample time to understand that. Go to Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 7. This is just a wonderful passage. And frankly, I was thinking about it this morning as I was coming over. Again, we're trying to prove scientific accuracy in the Bible. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. I was thinking about it. Crossed over, came off of Glendale and turned left turn right to get on 121 again and head back to church. In that river, just as you go past or as you start to turn, that little river, it's not really a river, creek around here, but it was so full. And you think about it, that water's going somewhere, isn't it? That water's going to turn into something else. And I was thinking about, and it's just, I guess, fun for me to think about God's beauty, His majesty, His ability. You go to any of our little creeks around here, you look at how dirty those are. And if you were to throw something in there and just let it go, you could put a GPS tracker on that water. It's all going to end up in the ocean. But it's going to be clean. That water will not be the same color as it is right here of when it, I don't know, probably makes it out to the Mississippi River and then heads out to the ocean from there. Because we serve a God that is so great, so majestic, so powerful that He's designed waterfalls and certain things that clean His water. And it goes out to sea. The sea doesn't fill up. It doesn't flood the lands that God has given us. The 7 continents still exist. But then we see here in verse 7, all the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place where the rivers come, thither they return again. That's evaporation. The sun in the deep oceans absorbs so much moisture in evaporation. Yet that evaporation turns into the atmosphere, the firmament, the things that God has already designed. That's why we could not possibly exist without God's creation, without God's handiwork. In the clouds, the firmament, the atmosphere, they pick up the moisture and they take it over the continents and they release it down again. And it's a consistent cycle of moisture. Not only did He tell us about evaporation, but He designed it. It's a wonderful thing to think about. Water is such a powerful source, yet it does nothing more than what God has designed it and allowed it to do. As the air cools, that vapor, it condenses, it forms clouds, it moves across the land, and then it brings it back in snow, hail, ice, rain. In different parts of the earth, in different parts of snow, hail, ice, and rain are used to provide a habitat, a quality of life for this earth, all across it. It's the law of evaporation, the teaching of evaporation in the Bible is so vast, yet we don't see it all the time. Now, back up one verse. In verse 6, the wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. There's that word again, circuits. What we see here is trade winds, seasonal winds. It's interesting to notice that Solomon was the wisest man that ever walked on the face of the earth, and God has given him the revelation in the book of Ecclesiastes of the wind, of evaporation. And you'll see some other things in there, but he's given him those teachings. He uses great wisdom to speak of the revelation that God gave him about the wind. You know, you think about it. Think about the wind. You think about this verse. What is God? Well, God is omnipresent. In simple terms, God is everywhere. All the time. Always has been. When you read verse 1 chapter 6, chapter 1, verse 6. The wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. You think about something. Wind, where we lived in Ohio, it was windy 80% of the time. And because it was flat, there was nothing to stop it. There's no trees out there. So we'd have 15-mile-an-hour winds 80% of our days. But there's many places that you could drive in northwest Ohio that you could have no wind at all. To understand that the wind goes towards the south, that the wind turns toward the north, that it whirls continually, means you have to be everywhere all the time and see the direction of the wind. Can you see the direction of the wind? No, you can see the result of the direction of the wind. You can't see the wind. But the wind patterns change with the seasons. In winter, the north wind goes down over Israel to Negev, the desert land in southern part of Israel. And then the summer, it carries the wind back towards the north. And this was just one example. The winds don't care, really. They don't care about if we don't like the wind. They go forth, north, south, whichever way they want to go based on the Lord's design. To understand the wind, you have to understand that God sees all directions of it. He sees all of it. Lastly, I'm going to try to do this one somewhat quickly, but go to Genesis chapter 9. Genesis chapter 9 and verse 4. But flesh, with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. It's hard for me to read around this and pick and choose because there's so much in here. But what God has revealed to us is what the blood is. What blood is. And we'll have another passage in a minute. Well, let's just go to Leviticus chapter 17. We'll get that reading out of the way. Leviticus chapter 17, pick up in verse 11. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul. Go to verse 14. For it is the life of all flesh, the blood of it is for the life thereof. Therefore I said unto the children of Israel, ye shall eat the blood of no manner of flesh, for the life of all flesh is the blood thereof. Whosoever eateth it shall be cut off. Bible depicts and tells us what blood is. It's very clear. Blood is life. Blood gives life. It carries on the functions of life. That is scientific evidence. If you were to cut yourself today and run out of blood, you have no life left. it takes blood to survive. It wasn't permitted to be consumed because it was the life of the flesh. Now, this was a law teaching in the book of Leviticus for the Jews at the time. And I put this in here. After the flood, we were permitted to eat meat. Blood was to be used to make atonement for the souls, but it had to be clean. The blood itself had to be clean. The thought in my mind surrounds blood. What happened if you were the first person on earth and you cut yourself? Now you think about how spoiled we are. We start to have an ailment, we just get on Google and we learn we're dying. You know, but think of it. If you're the first person on earth and you trip and we know that there is no thistles on the earth until after Adam's sin. The thorns of the earth. He's just walked in this lush green that he didn't have to worry about, and then all of a sudden he's walking in thistles. What do thistles do? Well, they cut you. They don't feel very good, and if you get into them too quick, they'll make you bleed. What do you think happened? Think about that first person that started bleeding and hurting and seeing something in their arm or leg or wherever they would be injured at. It's a teaching from God of what blood is. I know it's difficult. I know this seems sometimes like it's over our head, but that's because we make it over our head. It's so simple. We have to study, we have to learn, we have to try. There's scientific evidence that shows that God did all things first. He provided us with the earth being round first. He provided us with evaporation first. He provided us with a description of the winds and the seasons first. All these things man wants to take claim for. God revealed it so. I understand and I know that this is going to be probably a difficult study at times. It's probably a difficult study on a Sunday afternoon after we've all ate our fill and the lights are dim and I'm talking a lot. But I hope you understand that this is just one of many parts of many Sundays and probably Wednesdays of us understanding who God is, what the Bible is, what we believe. My burden is so heavy that we would believe something. I didn't see anybody jump out of their seats. I was waiting to see if anybody would jump out of their seats when I said that. No, that you would believe the Bible. That you would understand the Bible. That you would understand the teachings of the Bible. I believe so seriously that we ought to be studying to show ourselves approved. Why? Because we needeth not be ashamed. A workman that needeth not be ashamed. That's why. We're going to continue on next week. We'll get into the prophecies. I didn't want to take the time today. But let's get into the prophecies. The prophecy of Cyrus. The prophecy of what he did. How it was revealed. How it had to be only revealed by God. God revealed what he was going to do with King Cyrus 150 or so years before he did it. Before King Cyrus was even born. King Cyrus was a Persian king, not an Israelite king. The ways and the teachings of the Bible is so vast. And then we'll get into Psalms 22, Isaiah chapter 53, and some other passages about the sufferings of Christ as they were foretold in both the Old and the New Testament before they happened. We have science, we have prophecy, and we have Christ. And all things point to the Bible's true accuracy. And furthermore, and the last thing I'll say in closing, people today are still trying to say that the Bible is inaccurate. But it's things like what we did today that they can't disapprove of. That no matter how hard they try, they cannot discredit. And that is why God's Word will always stand. That's why God's Word will always persevere. We'll close in a word of prayer tonight, this afternoon.